Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Kyle's voice cracked through the silence of the dimly lit Abbott living room, his question sharp and demanding, the kind that left no room for evasion. Whose baby is that? And for a long suspended moment it seemed as though time itself had stopped, the clock on the mantel ticking in a rhythm that mocked the storm of emotions boiling just beneath Claire's fragile composure, her chest rising and falling in quick, shallow breaths as she clutched the soft blanket wrapped around the infant, her knuckles turning white, her eyes glossed with tears she had held back for far too long, because the truth she carried was not just about a child but about betrayal, secrets, and the tangled web of choices that had already bound her life so tightly to the Newman and Abbott families. Kyle's demand was not just curiosity, it was desperation laced with suspicion, the kind that comes from months of half-answers, side glances, and whispers of conversations that stopped the second he entered a room. And now, confronted with the undeniable presence of a baby that clearly connected to Claire's private struggles, he needed the truth, any truth, to finally understand where he fit into the ever-shifting puzzle of her existence. But Claire, with tears streaking down her cheeks, shook her head first, a desperate silent plea that begged him not to push her further, not to make her say the name that would shatter everything she had carefully built and destroy the fragile thread of trust still holding between them. The baby stirred in her arms, letting out a soft cry, and the sound was like a dagger through her heart, because this innocent life had become the embodiment of her mistakes, her loneliness, and her search for belonging in a world that never fully let her forget the sins of her parents and the darkness of her past. Kyle took a step closer, his eyes flashing with anger but also something deeper, something softer he was trying to hide, because as much as he wanted to rage, as much as he wanted to accuse, there was still a part of him that cared, a part that remembered how Claire had once confessed her fears to him, how she had trembled in his arms, whispering about wanting a clean slate, about wanting to prove that she wasn't defined by Jordan's manipulation or the Newman legacy of lies. And now here she was again, trembling, this time with a baby between them. And when she finally found her voice it cracked like broken glass. Kyle, please, don't make me say it. Because once I do, nothing will ever be the same. But Kyle's jaw tightened, his fists curling at his sides, and he snapped back. It's already not the same, Claire, it hasn't been the same since you walked into my life. Now answer me, whose baby is that? And his words echoed through the room, forcing her to finally break, the dam of composure shattering as sobs racked her body, tears spilling freely. Her voice shaking as she whispered the name she had been terrified to utter, the father's name that would send shockwaves through every family in Genoa City. It's Kane's. And the moment the syllables left her lips the room seemed to collapse inward. Kyle's breath caught in his throat, his entire body going rigid, because Kane Ashby's name was the last one he had expected, the last one he wanted to hear, and yet it made a sick kind of sense, explaining the late-night phone calls Claire dodged, the strange looks exchanged whenever Kane walked into society, the nervous way Claire avoided conversations whenever Lily's name came up, and as the truth sank in Kyle staggered back a step, his face paling, his heart pounding with betrayal and disbelief, his mind racing with questions he didn't want answers to, while Claire continued to sob, her words tumbling out in a rush of anguish. I didn't mean for it to happen, Kyle, I swear I didn't, it was a mistake, it was loneliness. It was everything I shouldn't have done, but Kane was there. He listened when I felt invisible. He understood the pressure, the constant shadow of being a Newman, the weight of everyone waiting for me to fail. I wasn't looking for this, I didn't want this, but now I have this baby, and I can't deny her, I can't deny him, I can't deny what happened. And she buried her face into the baby's blanket, rocking the infant gently as though that motion alone could shield her from the storm she had just unleashed. But Kyle was not a man who could easily process betrayal, not when it came wrapped in the name of Kane Ashby, a man who had already destroyed so much of his trust before, a man who had tangled himself in the lives of Lily, Billy, and even Phyllis in ways that still left scars across the Abbott family. Kyle's voice dropped low, dangerous, trembling not with tears but with the force of repressed fury. You mean to tell me, all this time, while I've been fighting for you, defending you against everyone who said you couldn't be trusted, while I've been standing up to my father, to Summer, to Audra, you were with Kane? Kane? And now there's a child, his child, and Claire flinched as if struck, because she could hear the pain under his anger, The devastation that came from realizing the woman he wanted to believe in had given herself to another man, a man he despised, and she tried to reach out, tried to plead with him, her trembling hand lifting as though to touch his arm. But Kyle stepped back sharply, his rejection as clear as the anguish in his eyes. And in that moment Claire realized she had not just revealed a secret, she had detonated a bomb, one that would ripple through the Abbott, Newman, and Ashby families with consequences she couldn't even imagine yet, because Kane, for all his sins, was still connected to Lily, still entangled with Devon, still a father to children who would now be forced to reckon with a half-sibling born of scandal, and Kyle, standing before her, represented not just the man she had hurt but the Abbott legacy itself, a family that would never forgive, never forget, and as the baby whimpered again, Kyle's gaze softened for only a fraction of a second, his heart betraying his anger as he looked at the tiny life caught in the middle of a storm she hadn't asked to be born into. But that softness was fleeting, swallowed quickly by the bitter taste of betrayal, and his words came out in a whisper that felt sharper than any shout. "You should have told me before, you should have trusted me before it got this far." And with that he turned, his footsteps heavy as he walked away, leaving Claire sobbing, clutching the child tighter, the weight of her confession settling over her like chains. And for the first time since she discovered she was pregnant, she realized that telling the truth did not set her free. It only bound her more tightly to the consequences she had been so desperate to avoid. Kyle stormed out of the Abbott mansion, his steps uneven but quick, his mind a blur of fury and disbelief, every thought crashing into the next, his chest tight with the weight of betrayal and humiliation, because the echo of Claire's trembling confession, "It's Kane's," would not leave his head. It ricocheted through his skull, louder with each second, feeding the rage boiling inside him. And yet beneath the fury lay something far more dangerous, hurt, the kind of wound that bled deeper because he had cared, because he had wanted to believe in her, to give her the benefit of the doubt when everyone else had warned him not to. And now the proof of their doubts had been laid bare in the most devastating way, in the form of a baby whose very existence was proof that Claire had been with another man. Not just any man but Kane Ashby, a man Kyle despised, a man with a history of lies and scandals that rivaled even his own. And as he reached his car he slammed his hand against the roof, cursing under his breath, his voice breaking. "Damn it, Claire, why him?" While inside the mansion Claire's sobs continued, muffled now as she pressed her lips against her baby's forehead, whispering apologies the child could never understand. "I'm so sorry, sweet girl, I never wanted you to be born into chaos, I never wanted your first days to be surrounded by anger and betrayal." But the tears wouldn't stop, because she knew Kyle was right. She should have told him sooner, she should have confessed when the pregnancy test first came back positive, when Kane had first offered to keep everything quiet, when her fear of losing Kyle hadn't yet outweighed the guilt of what she had done. But she had been weak, she had been scared, and now it was too late, the damage irreparable. Meanwhile Kyle drove aimlessly through Genoa City, the night lights blurring past him as his thoughts turned darker, his anger no longer just directed at Claire but at Kane himself, because what right did Kane have to sleep with Claire, to father a child with her, when Kyle had been trying to build something real, something stable, and now that stability was shattered, replaced by the image of Kane smirking, Kane acting like he always did, reckless and smug, like rules didn't apply to him. And the thought of Kane holding that baby, Claire's baby, twisted Kyle's stomach until he nearly swerved off the road, gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles as he muttered through clenched teeth, "I'll make him pay for this. I swear I'll make him regret ever touching her." But Kane, at that very moment, was sitting in his apartment nursing a glass of whiskey, staring at a photo of his own children, Charlie and Matty, wondering how he had let his life spin so far out of control again. Because no matter how much he tried to convince himself that what happened with Claire was a mistake, a lapse in judgment during a night when they were both lonely and vulnerable, the reality was that there was now a child, a living reminder of his inability to keep his impulses in check. And though he hadn't said it out loud, though he hadn't even admitted it to Lily, Kane knew in his gut that Claire's baby was his, the timing too precise, the guilt in her eyes whenever they crossed paths too telling. And now that truth was out, he could feel it in the pit of his stomach, like a storm was about to break. And he wasn't wrong, because within the hour Kyle was at his door, pounding his fist against it, with a force that rattled the frame, his voice seething, "Open the damn door, Kane." And when Kane finally did, the sight of Kyle's blazing eyes told him everything. Claire had talked, The secret was no longer a secret, and before he could even form a word, Kyle shoved him hard against the wall, his voice cracking with fury. How could you? How could you do this to me, to her, to your own family? You slept with Claire, you got her pregnant, and you thought what? That I'd never find out? That you could just hide a baby from the world? And Kane, though stunned by the violence, didn't fight back at first, his face grim as he absorbed Kyle's accusations, because fighting would only make things worse. But Kyle wasn't letting up, his fists trembling at his sides as he growled. Answer me, Kane, or I swear to God. And finally Kane snapped, his voice rising with a mix of shame and defensiveness. You think I wanted this? You think I planned any of it? I made a mistake, Kyle, a terrible one, and I've been trying to figure out how to make it right, but there is no right, not anymore. Claire's baby is mine, and I can't change that, but don't you dare stand there and act like you're the only one who's been hurt by this, because I've got kids, I've got a family that will never forgive me once they find out, and I've already lost more than you can imagine. But Kyle wasn't moved, his voice dropping low, venomous. You don't get to play the victim. Here, Kane, you knew what you were doing, you knew she was with me, and you didn't care, you saw her weakness and you exploited it, just like you've always done, because you're selfish, you're reckless, and now there's a baby who's going to pay the price for your mistakes. And Kane, unable to take the weight of Kyle's condemnation, shoved him back, his own anger breaking through. Don't you dare put all this on me, Kyle. Claire's not a child, she made choices too, and maybe if you'd been paying more attention, maybe if you'd given her what she needed, she wouldn't have come to me in the first place. And that was the spark that lit the fire, Kyle's fist flying before either of them could stop it, connecting with Kane's jaw, sending him stumbling back, his glass of whiskey shattering on the floor. And suddenly the room was a battlefield, years of resentment and rivalry exploding into violence. Each punch not just about Claire but about everything that had ever gone wrong between them. About family legacies, failed marriages, broken trust, and when they finally collapsed apart, panting, bruised, the silence between them was heavier than the fight itself, broken only by Kane's ragged whisper. This baby didn't ask to be born into this mess. Kyle, we both need to remember that. But Kyle, blood on his lip, eyes cold, spat back. You can play noble all you want, Kane, but this isn't about what the baby asked for, it's about the choices you made, and I'll never forgive you for them. And with that he stormed out, leaving Kane slumped against the wall, clutching his jaw, knowing the war had only just begun. The next day, word began to spread, because secrets like this never stayed hidden in Genoa City, not when Victor Newman had ears everywhere. And by noon Victor himself was sitting behind his desk at Newman Enterprises, a sly smile curling on his lips as he read the report handed to him by one of his investigators. So, Claire's child is Kane's. Interesting, very interesting. And already his mind was spinning with possibilities, because this wasn't just scandal, it was leverage, the kind that could fracture alliances and tip the balance of power in his favor. And Victor loved nothing more than turning someone else's tragedy into his triumph. While across town Lily Winters sat in crimson lights, scrolling through her phone when a message popped up, an anonymous text that made her heart stop. Claire's baby belongs to Kane, ask him yourself. And in that instant her world tilted, memories flooding back of every betrayal Kane had ever committed, every lie he had ever told, every time she had given him another chance only to be burned again. And though she tried to steady her breathing, the tears stung her eyes, because deep down she knew it was true. Kane had that look lately, that distracted, guilt-ridden look she knew all too well, and the thought of him fathering a child with Claire, of all people, made her stomach churn, and she whispered bitterly to herself, "Not again, Kane, not again." While elsewhere Claire sat alone in her apartment, the baby asleep in her bassinet, her mind haunted by the look on Kyle's face when she confessed, by the way his anger had been laced with heartbreak, and though she wanted to call him, to beg for another chance, her phone sat untouched on the table, because what could she say now, what words could undo the truth? And as she watched her daughter sleep, she whispered through tears, "I'll protect you, no matter what it takes, even if I have to do it alone." And she meant it, because if Genoa City had taught her anything, it was that secrets were weapons, and now that hers was out, war was inevitable. Lily arrived at Kane's apartment before the sun even set, her heels clicking against the floor with the sound of determination masking the earthquake beneath her calm exterior. And when Kane opened the door, still bruised from his fight with Kyle, the flicker of guilt in his eyes was all the confirmation she needed. "It's true, isn't it?" she demanded, her voice steady but laced with the kind of hurt that could shatter a soul, and Kane froze. Every excuse he had rehearsed evaporating as Lily stepped inside without invitation, crossing her arms as if to shield herself from the storm about to break. "Don't bother lying, Kane. I already know. The only thing I need from you is honesty this time. So say it. Tell me that Claire's baby is yours." And Kane, his throat dry, his heart pounding with shame, whispered the truth. "Yes, Lily, the baby is mine." And the words were like knives slicing through the air, each syllable cutting Lily deeper, her face twisting with pain she refused to let him see. And for a long moment the silence was unbearable, broken only by her sharp inhale before she said, her voice trembling now. "Do you realize what you've done to me? To us? To our family? To Charlie and Matty? After everything, after every chance I gave you, you still found a way to betray me. And not just me, Kane, but with Claire Newman, of all people, the one everyone warned Kyle not to trust, the one with a history so tangled and dark that even Victor doesn't fully understand her. And you thought what? That you could be the exception? That it wouldn't matter?" Her words pouring out like venom mixed with grief, and Kane, though guilt-stricken, tried to step closer, tried to reach for her. "Lily, I didn't mean for this to happen. It was one mistake, one night. I was broken, lonely, and so was she." But Lily cut him off, her eyes flashing. "Don't you dare try to justify it. Don't you dare try to make me pity you. Because this wasn't loneliness, Kane, this was weakness, selfishness. The same weakness that's destroyed us time and again. And now there's a baby, an innocent baby who had no say in this, and she's going to grow up in the shadow of your mistakes, just like Charlie and Matty had to." And with that she turned, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, her shoulders squared with resolve. "I'm done, Kane. This time, I mean it. I can't keep cleaning up your messes. I can't keep forgiving you, not when you've crossed a line that can't be uncrossed." And she walked out before he could stop her, leaving him standing in the wreckage of his choices. While across town Victor Newman leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers, watching the city lights flicker through the window of his office, a predator savoring the scent of blood in the water, because he had already instructed Michael Baldwin to discreetly gather documents, photographs, and hospital records tying Kane to Claire's baby, leverage he could use against both the Abbott and Ashby families. And when Michael questioned him, raising an eyebrow, "Victor, what exactly do you plan to gain from this? It's not as if Claire's baby has Newman blood." Victor only smirked, his voice low and calculating. "It doesn't need to have Newman blood, Michael. It has Abbott entanglements, Ashby entanglements, and chaos that weakens them is strength for me. Kane's mistake is a weapon, and I intend to use it when the time is right." His eyes glittering with the satisfaction of a man who knew how to turn scandal into empire. While in her apartment Claire paced restlessly, the baby in her bassinet sleeping soundly, unaware of the storm swirling around her existence. And Claire's hands shook as she scrolled through her phone, dozens of missed calls and texts from Kyle flashing on the screen before she tossed it aside, unable to face his anger again, whispering to herself, "I told the truth, I did what I had to do. Why does it still feel like everything is slipping through my fingers?" Because telling Kyle had not brought relief, it had brought devastation, not just for her but for Kane, for Lily, for everyone connected to this fragile life. And now she was terrified, not just of the fallout but of Victor, because she knew in her bones that Victor Newman would find a way to weaponize her child. He always found a way to turn weakness into power. And though she wanted to be strong, she felt like that scared little girl again, manipulated by Jordan, branded by her past, and she whispered to her sleeping daughter, "I'll protect you from all of them, I promise, no matter what I have to do." But even as she said it, a knock rattled her door, sharp and demanding, and when she opened it Kyle stood there, disheveled, his eyes red-rimmed, his anger dulled into something more dangerous, heartbreak, and his voice cracked when he spoke. "I needed to see her. I needed to see the baby." And Claire hesitated, then stepped aside, allowing him in, watching as his gaze immediately fell on the tiny child in the bassinet, his features softening despite himself. Because no matter how much he hated the circumstances, no matter how deeply Claire had hurt him, the sight of an innocent baby stirred something in him, and he approached slowly, kneeling beside the bassinet, his voice barely a whisper. "She's beautiful. She doesn't deserve any of this." And Claire's tears welled up again, because she could hear the ache in his words, the longing for something pure amidst the chaos, and when she reached out to touch his shoulder, He didn't flinch away this time, though his voice was still heavy with pain. I don't know if I can ever forgive you.